I think it's probably a good time too to go back 3 years. Like, I think when you look at Kyle in this way, that he got paid, right? He's a top 5 paid coach now because he is a play calling savant. He is a fantastic play caller. But he got extended. Like, he put himself in this position in part because he answered the one big question we had about him when he got hired. The question we had about him when he got hired was not, is he a great play caller? Like, that we knew, right? The question was, is he like a crank? Like, he got talked about like he was like a cranky only child, like who can't play well with others. And then we learned pretty quickly that it's the opposite of that. Like, it's fine. Not only is it fine, he's really good at being a head coach, right? And so his elite skill is the play calling. That's kind of the thing that's out there for everybody to see. But he's in this position, I think, just to be the coach for another 6 years. Even if he was a middle of the pack play caller, he does clearly just have the basic leadership skills necessary. And maybe the play calling is what helps him be a leader. Early on, when the Niners were bad, we interviewed George Kittle, and he explained, and a lot of guys said things, but we got to talk to Kittle at the Niners facility last offseason. He's like, yeah, what everybody says about Kyle predicting plays and the players believing fully that he's going to get the best out of you because he's going to put you in a position, like, all that stuff is true. So you can't really separate him. Like, his play calling is part of probably his leadership, because the players immediately respect his ability to communicate the game. But, like, I think that's a big part of this. Is there was one question about him when he got the job, and it wasn't, is he a genius? It was, can he get along well enough?
I think back in my time in scouting, and I learned this just from listening to people's experiences of scouting players. They said you had to be very, very careful that an individual you talk to, whether it's an assistant coach, and the way football works, if you have the SEC or the Pac-12, you're going to get coaches that were at previous schools that you're also going to. So if you're in the office with the offensive coordinator at Washington or Georgia, he might have previously been at USC or Alabama or whatever, right? So you're going to go, oh, what did you think about their sweet wide receiver? And there's a chance he goes, I hated the motherfucker. I couldn't stand him. He wouldn't listen. He was a dick. And yet you're like, every other person at the program, like, loves him. You're like, why? And maybe for whatever reason, they just had a bad experience. And I think when you look at Kyle, the elephant in the room with Kyle really came from the Washington experience. And the farther we get away from it, you're like, feels like Mike Pettin liked him. The reason he left Cleveland because he hated Johnny Manziel. And you go, yeah, I could see Kyle Shanahan would rather sit out the season than coach Johnny Manziel, right? At that point in time in his career, still to this day, he's like, Kyle Shanahan wouldn't touch a player like Johnny Manziel with a 50-foot pole. And then in Atlanta, it was actually all rosy. Really, that first year, him and Matt Ryan didn't see eye to eye offensively, but they clearly liked each other, right? And I think back, we had an experience, I probably led the charge, of not seeing eye to eye with a boss. I'd gotten along with everyone I'd worked for my entire life or with. And that one, I would imagine if you went to those guys for a recommendation, some of the people at the radio station, they'd crush me. Say I was an asshole. I'd say, well, check my life resume, right? But if you were just going to that person, where if you were just going to Bruce Allen, the people in Washington, and Dan Snyder, they're crushing Kyle. And Kyle's even said it over this year, right? Like, we wanted to get Trent, but I thought, hell, no way in hell we're getting that guy. And I credit Kyle. Even last season, he still crushed Dan Snyder because deep down he knows it's right. Like, I wasn't in the wrong. You guys were the fucking idiots, right? And it's pretty much been proven out as time has gone on.
Who are you speaking for right now, yourself or Kyle?
I'm speaking for Kyle.
Oh, okay. But it's easy to mistake that for something else.
I can do it too. But I can relate to the sense of if other people are talking to that person about you, they're going to hear negative things. And deep down, you're like, if you're going to listen to that idiot in the first place, you're a moron, one. And two, of course they're going to crush me. I didn't respect them. Was I maybe a little unprofessional? Sure. Should they be professionals? No. And Kyle, up until this year, which is kind of speaks to, took a major shot at the Washington Redskins. Remember when he was asked, what was your time in Washington like? Or what do you have any fond memories? He's like, not one beside the people, whatever his exact comment was. And I think if you could siphon that out, I wonder if that reputation on Kyle Shanahan would have ever existed. Because I think when he came from Houston, I remember everyone in the NFL was like, God, this is kind of a young hotshot. And then even those first 2 years in Washington was like, they just implemented the pistol offense out of nowhere. Mike Shanahan just sent Kyle out to Baylor and to Nevada, and he just learned it. Like, I'd say looking back, it's actually more impressive, right? Same with Greg Roman. If you can just send a guy there and he's never done anything like that, and he can just learn the offense in like 2 months and then implement it and then have success, you could say, Jesus, we should have known right then. But the media and the Washington media, and I don't blame them, like Dan Snyder wasn't going anywhere, and for a long time Bruce Allen doesn't go anywhere. So you did have to, like, they're telling you things, you just report it. But I think if you just siphon out Washington, that's where he got that notion that I know I thought, and most people around here, if you follow football, you're like, what's this guy's deal? And he has been – could he have been any more opposite from what the quote-unquote narrative about his personality was to what he's actually been just in the public and just treating people? And my one little experience, just actually one-on-one with them, I don't think it could be any more opposite.
No, he's been what you'd want out of the face of the franchise, right? And in a way that you think will wear well over time. Asked what he loved most about working in Washington, he said being close to his dad. Asked what he didn't like, he said everything else. It's well subtly said.
Isn't it pretty impressive? Shows you that, actually, to me, that kind of speaks to Ron Rivera's got a lot of juice. That's a major shot at the owner, and they just traded their best player the last 20 years to the Niners, right? Would it put yourself in Dan Snyder's shoes?
There's no way you'd want to trade Trent Williams to the 49ers. Yeah, you would take less to send him somewhere else. The problem is that players want to play for Kyle.
Isn't it a good life
John,
lesson?
The problem is players want to play. Trent just wanted to be a 49er.
Don't you think it's a good life lesson, though, like back to the scouting thing of just if you're hiring someone or you're going to go into business with someone, you do need to talk to a lot of people that have been around that person if it's going to be a big deal or it's going to be something financial or it's going to be something serious in your life, because one person is just that person is going to have potentially an independent experience or something. I don't want to use necessarily the word agenda, but maybe for whatever reason they just didn't see eye to eye, and you could get some words, and depending on who that individual is you talk with. Like if you're run a business and you're hiring a guy and one of the companies he worked for was like Apple, and somehow you could like talk to Tim Cook, and let's say Tim Cook hated the guy, you would just put what he said at a really, really high level, though that guy, let's just say it was a weird situation for him and he actually wasn't that bad of a guy, and everyone else you talked to was like, I'm telling you, it was a weird deal, I would throw that in the trash, great guy, produced for me. You just, the more you can do that, because Kyle is a great example of someone that kind of had this thing hanging over him, and it just hasn't been the case.
I also think the fact that his dad is Mike Shanahan. Now, Kyle's resume before he became a head coach spoke for itself. I wonder if that was part of that perception, right? This idea that like this, people would maybe go in with the preconceived notion that maybe Kyle doesn't deserve the opportunities he's gotten.
Think about his first shot, who the guy was.
Yeah.
Kubiak was Mike Shanahan's guy, right? I mean, that just...
And then he was and then he's Mike's OC. So maybe that's a part of it. Maybe it's just he does speak in a very matter-of-fact way. When you're a coordinator, you maybe just either feel less comfortable saying some of the things you can say as a head coach that show your personality. You certainly have less opportunities to do it. It's not really your team, so you can't quite speak as freely as maybe you would in other situations. I think, we watch a lot of Kyle. We watch all Kyle's press conferences. He says things in a certain way sometimes that don't involve a smile, but are funny, right? Like he is. So, and you
kind of a drier
like,
personality.
Yeah, early in his Niners tenure, he's opening the door for the Sharks and just doing all this stuff. You go, okay, you could see it really quickly. And obviously John Lynch believed in it because John's the one that called Kyle and said, like, hey, man, I'm available. John Lynch doesn't see, so it just, a lot of things worked in his favor once he got the job. But the biggest thing was just, it was the opportunity to fully be, this is fully his job. He can fully be himself.
Well, think about the opposite. Think about the opposite end of that. If a guy's crushing it, what if a guy, the Niners almost hired this guy once upon a time, Adam Gase, because who was his number one proponent? It was like, I'm telling you,
Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning is beating the drum for this guy. It's like, hey, man. And I all ready for me the first to raise my hand. I believe in Peyton. If you could hang with Peyton, like, you got to get Peyton. And it's just, I'd say it's been a little rockier than the way the picture Peyton now, because Peyton's experience with him was fantastic, and he's kind of like him. But is there a chance that Peyton maybe didn't have the best judgment of what he would actually be as a head coach?
Or what Peyton needs is not what most people need. How about that?
Maybe that's it too. Isn't it kind of speaks to? Can't remember where I saw this. Maybe you told me this, or Phil Jackson was saying this somewhere about Kobe. He's like, I really had to hammer home to young Kobe, like, bro, not everyone can operate at your level. You holding these guys to these standards, this team, it's going to crumble. And like you said, Peyton is just the nuttiest of nut jobs, and he met a nut job, and he's like, this is me, but a coach version. And it turns out, yeah, that doesn't really resonate with a lot of guys, right? So Peyton, a lot of your former teammates thought you were kind of crazy. I mean, there's just, and that's what's unique about Kyle for being like this quote unquote savant and being a guy that's all football. It doesn't feel like he overwhelms people with it. He's got this human element to him, right? I don't know. I just know Coach Reed, his hours were just like relentless. I would imagine Kyle's not 8 to 5, but it does feel like however he's able to do it is a little more. Now he's got a core group of offensive helpers that they've been working together a while, right? Yeah. They got a pretty well-oiled machine with his crew, which helps.
I think the other thing you feel really good about, I kind of mentioned it earlier though, but when I go back to everything that's not the play calling, but it was really hard. We talked about it a lot. You could see it on his face those first 2 years. For as good as some things were that made us feel really confident that he was a good coach, there was just a lot of failure. And he was coming off a Super Bowl loss, and that got brought up all the time. We've seen him answer that question so many times. He just lost another Super Bowl. In a short amount of time, the organization has had a lot of opportunities to see Kyle handle failure. And that's most of life. I mean, we always talk about it like with baseball. You just have to be able to handle it, and it's certainly the case in football. And, I don't know. With Harbaugh, it was so good so fast, and then it just completely fell apart for a variety of reasons. But I do think if you're a leader, you probably get so much more credit from the people you lead when you are put in a shit situation or when you're dealing with something that sucks. And those are your opportunities to lead. Like when everything's going great, that's fine, but those aren't really your best opportunities to lead. Your opportunities to lead are a player's brother dies. Your team is terrible. Your quarterbacks are all getting hurt. Your defensive coordinator is getting crushed. Like those are your opportunities to lead.
It's pretty easy to do 1, 2, 3.
You have to kick your first round pick off the team, right? Like those are all your opportunities to lead.
It's much easier to do, 1, 2, 3, way to kick ass after 20-point wins. You're right. They did have a lot of crazy shit happen to them in a short period of time that had to, and I think will help him moving forward, right? Just having adversity early on and not having, that probably speaks to the first 6-year contract. There was like never a question, is he on the hot seat, or there was no, he definitely benefited from Jed's previous 2 mistakes. Like he was getting a long landing strip.
Yeah.
They were giving him,
I'd say, you're right. Yeah.
Even if he didn't make the playoffs, he was going 5.
Does he get a 6-year contract if the previous coach had been here 15 years and retired?
No, he probably gets a 4 or 5 year deal, right? Now, if it had gone just like it gone, maybe they fell in love with him. Maybe he would get a 6-year deal now, but I'm with,
initially,
no. Yeah, it was. It shows you the power. I do believe the power of knowing what it's like to lose for anyone is a big deal. I think in any profession, just because you learn way more to me in failure than you do in success. Like people just like, oh, well, Belichick's had nothing but success for 20 years. Well, Google the Cleveland years. I mean, he had some rough fucking years. And you also know, I think, when you're losing, what is actually working. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to stick with this. I know it's working. I got to tweak this, but this, while it doesn't show in the win-loss, I know it's going to work. Because you never went like, Kyle just threw away the offense after 2 years and just went to a whole new thing. Like, he was never doing that. Now, maybe they made individual tweaks, but I think he knew he was on the right path and it was going to work. And I think it's harder to do that when you're not secure, and it's harder to be secure. And it's back to what you always say. People do not talk about him like he was a 9-year offensive coordinator for 4 different teams. It was like, just young gun getting a shot. Like he's Theo Epstein, just 27-year-old.
Mike Shanahan's kid getting a shot. Yeah.
Yeah. It was 9 years as an offensive coordinator. Worked for multiple coaches that were not Kubiak or Shanahan, and they would not have gone to the Super Bowl and the Atlanta Falcons if it wasn't for Kyle and Matt Ryan. And even Matt would tell you like that shit worked, right? Made him the MVP. It made Matt Ryan's, unless they win a Super Bowl, which I think is fair to say the Atlanta Falcons probably will not win a Super Bowl in Matt Ryan's career. He will be known when he's playing golf tournaments, when he's 45, when he just seems like he'll be giving business talks and stuff. Former MVP Matt Ryan, right? That's how he'll be introduced. Former MVP, not 7-time Pro Bowl, former MVP of the National Football League, Matt Ryan.
And tailor-made ambassador, Matt Ryan.
Exactly. Exactly. And Visa check holder, Matt Ryan. Come on down.